Hi, friends. This is Wendy Harrop, and welcome to the Say Yes to Yourself podcast. On the Say Yes to Yourself podcast, you'll hear stories from women just like us who are adding the practice of saying yes in their daily lives in big and small ways, and as a result, are experiencing the truth that everybody wins when you say yes to yourself. Saying yes to yourself is a graceful unfolding, an intentional becoming of the very best version of you. It is my hope that in these conversations, we are able to find our truth and be inspired and empowered to live our very best lives. I'm so excited to go on this journey with you, and I look forward to finding a bit of our own story in each other's. Hey friends, I am so excited for you to hear this episode with my friend Mercedes Kiss. She had a really fancy career in New York City, working for an architecture firm and interior designer and all of these fabulous things. And she has made some changes on her career path, but really just in beautiful alignment for who she is becoming. She is a very accomplished artist. She's phenomenal. I'm really happy for you to get to know her. You'll have an opportunity to follow her, see some of her beautiful work. I'm going to link everything in the show notes for you. Sit back and take a listen to this gorgeous conversation with my friend Mercedes. Mercedes, my sweet friend, I'm so happy to have this conversation with you. How are you doing?
Wendy, I am honored. It's a delight. You are the newest and brightest light of my life. Like we're somewhat recent friends, but it feels like planets orbiting and now we're just kind of aligned.
Yes, and I feel like we have so much time to make up for in the years that we were not friends. So every conversation is multiple hours long and we're almost yelling to each other as we're parting. Like, okay, you have to get in the car, but we'll do this again.
I forget where I heard this, if it was a book or a podcast, but this barometer of knowing if a friend is really something to hold on to, or really anyone, but when you leave their presence, do you feel completely just electric with delight? Or is there this like twinge of any sort of negative feeling?
Right.
And from the second I met you, like even from our first hug, without even actually speaking, it's like, oh, I just want her to embrace me forever.
Yay! And that's what I want right back. Oh my goodness. Well, we were chatting before I hit record, and halfway through your sentence, I just said, oh my gosh, I wish we were recording already. So I love that all of our conversations just feel, for me, so inspiring. And I really just, you are such a treasure. And I'm very thrilled for the conversation we're about to have, all the ones we're going to have in the future. And I'm feeling especially elated at the opportunity to have this conversation in a more public forum, because you have such wisdom and such grace and such a desire to learn and be more in alignment with whom you are supposed to be and whom you are becoming. And that is just energizing to be around.
Thank you.
You are so welcome. I'm just happy to be here. So we were chatting about you have a great night's sleep, and the reason is that you are allergic to your beloved dog.
Yep. Allergic to my baby Ghosty. My husband, Josh, and I have a dog named Ghost, and he himself is a very allergic boy. He has a little bit of, well, he's a mutt from Puerto Rico, but he has a little bit of pit in him. And so his underbelly gets very allergic. And I've learned that in the 4 years since Josh and I have been together and Ghost has been in my life, that I'm incredibly allergic to Ghosty as well. So it's turned out to be this saga of prescription nasal sprays and neti pots and what works, but nothing really seems to be working consistently or tremendously well. So most nights in the past year, I've woken up in the 1 or 2 a.m. range and just been a sneeze fest for a few hours before, I guess, exhaustion kicks in and I just clonk back to sleep. So last night was one of those nights, and I was telling you before we started recording that the irony of it all is that I get up to go to a different room where Ghost might not follow me, but of course he loves me so much that he follows me into whatever new room I go into.
Right. The thing that I find is, just in the premise of this podcast, and it's a new adventure for me, and in really being mindful of the concept of saying yes to yourself, and why does that sometimes feel like an underused muscle, and why is there some conditioning around? For me personally, I think there's a lot of conditioning around making sure everybody else is happy and satisfied and cared for. And then if there is anything left over for me, then that's when it's my turn. And since that so rarely happens, if that is your conditioning and your personality, I have redefined taking care of myself as, well, when I take care of others, that's how I take care of myself. And giving is how I receive. And whatever tricky language we use to justify the way that we're acting that is unchallenged until we challenge it ourselves. And so, what we were talking about and what I found so fascinating is that this creature that is bringing you a lot of dis-ease in your body, a lot of discomfort, a lot of resistance in your body, this creature also brings so much love and acceptance, and it's a dog. So there's
Right.
unconditional love. So it's like, oh my gosh, I'm the worst person for wishing that you didn't have hair.
Yeah.
Laundry. And the only reason that I want to talk about it, I mean, I want to talk about everything, but there's just so much truth and so many nuggets in this particular situation that we can pull out for a myriad of other situations.
Yeah, it's a really interesting jumping off point because one aspect is he's so unconditionally loving, and insofar as we know about, dogs' minds, he's incapable of knowing that he's the one who's causing me this allergic reaction. He's just sitting there continuously pouring out this love and wants to be around me and follow me around constantly. It's wonderful. I think this is what I was telling you, is that my husband, Josh, he's a school teacher. He came in to give me a kiss this morning before he left. He sees Ghost on the bed with me, tissues hanging from my nose, Ghost looking up at me longingly. And he's like, Ghost loves you so much. And you're here just like a sneezy mess. And I looked at Josh and I said, yes, it's incredibly ironic. And this is also not sustainable. You and I need to work together to figure out how to make this life a little bit more pleasant for my nasal passages.
I love that so much because I find you and I so alike in so many ways. Like, I'm so attracted to you and your positive energy and the way you see things. And I don't know if I would have made that leap. Like, I don't know if I would have said those words out loud. And I don't know if I would have valued my experience over the current way things are going.
Right, like the harmony of the house.
Right. And I love that. Is just so empowered, and I want to applaud you for speaking your truth. And it's not a silly thing, because it is, for me, this was an underused muscle. And I am getting more accustomed to listening to my body, listening to my intuition, paying attention to what's going on, and making decisions based on how it feels to me. And so I'm really inspired by your word choice and the way that you are able to practice in all of these different areas of your life.
I guess last night's missing of sleep and all the ensuing conversations, or that, little snippet of conversation this morning with Joshi, it's endemic of how I've been living my life, I think, in the past 5 years. A bit of background is that I was an architect in Washington, D.C. and then New York City. And I had this quite interesting moment of clarity on a trip to Central America. And it kind of changed the course of my life, which has led to now. It's funny how one finds oneself in their current place, but then you look at all the little lily pads that you kind of leaped from. And in my mind, I think, oh, I leapt kind of forward, but sort of diagonally, and tried to fundamentally move forward. And so I'm looking back on all those little lily pad moments. And I guess I am in this place now where I can feel a feeling or be in a situation that doesn't feel fundamentally a total yes, and be able to, more often than not, speak up for whatever yes is living inside, trying to.
You're doing it well.
Trying. Yeah, we're all a work in progress.
For sure. Can you say more about that pivotal moment in Central America?
Yeah, it was awesome. So I was working for a very phenomenal and very well-regarded interior design and interior architecture firm in Manhattan. And pretty much everything about the situation from the outside in was very accolade worthy, very respected, and it was quite fancy. So it felt good to tell people that I worked for this firm and that I had this life. But inside I was really lonely. If I picture myself in my mind, there's a lot of, it's like in black and white. There's no color, there's no vibrance, there's no saturation, there's no sunshine. It's very clouded and dark and sad. It's like, I know,
opposite view.
I know, right? And so, and gosh, I remember the friends who I worked with, and I don't want to disparage the firm at all, because they and their work was great. It was me not aligning with that.
This is all about your experience.
Right. So the friends who I had in the firm, progressively as time went on, they would come and tap me on the shoulder and be like, we haven't seen you smile in days or weeks, and you don't seem like yourself. And I was like, yeah, I don't know what it is exactly, but I feel fundamentally, it's beyond unfulfilled. It was such a magnified sense of confusion. From the outside in, it feels, or should look so great and should feel so great, but I feel tremendously incorrect. Incorrect is the word that comes to mind. So around maybe January of 2016, my best friend Brooke and I were getting coffee, and we're like, we need a freaking vacation. So quite spur of the moment, over the next week, we planned this, I think it was a 5-night trip down to Costa Rica. She had a friend through her interior design experience who had left Manhattan, fell in love with some Australian guy, started an Airbnb, and we're kind of just surfing down there. It sounds incredibly cliche, right?
Yes.
It sounds really nice, but also very cliche. Right. So we went and stayed down at their place in this little beach town called Nosara. And for 5 days, we woke up at the crack of dawn and learned how to surf and surf really poorly, then didn't surf too horribly. But on the very last full day that we had there, Brookie wanted to go out for an afternoon surf. And I said, I'm pretty surfed out, so I'm just going to walk, take a run on the beach. So I'm running on the beach and I just have on my bathing suit and I'm looking out to the right and I've got the surf and just this completely magical and picture perfect sight off to the right with the surf and the air, and it's clean and it's gorgeous, and off to the left are these majestic mountains. And my body feels so free and I feel so light. And in that flash of a moment, I felt so correct there. And I thought, in 24 hours, I'm going to be back in this existence that I know is completely incorrect. And I'm the only one who has power to change that. I'm the decider of whether I have more of this, which is ridiculously awesome, or that, which could be awesome for someone else, but it's not for me. So I kind of made this deal with myself while on that run. I was like, if I get back to New York and having had this realization, if it still feels like I'm going to keep trying to live this life, but with a bigger mindset, if it still feels horrible, then I'm going to find a way out. But I'm going to give it a darn college try. So I get back and it doesn't get better. It gets like fundamentally worse. Like every person who I had dealt with who wasn't exactly great was actively, like, it felt like more daggery to me. So I was like, you know what? I don't know what the next best thing is, but I know what the next better thing is.
Oh, that's good.
In most scenarios that feel horrible, we can figure out a way that isn't necessarily the best, but what could be better. So I went through that next week at work and it's like, I can't continue on in this path. Like I started looking around at like my boss and my boss's boss. I was like, I don't want their jobs. Like they love their jobs, but I don't want that. So this is not sustainable. Then I'm back in my neighborhood the following weekend getting coffee. And my dad calls and he's this incredibly jovial, very like jolly Hungarian artist man, also an architect. And he lives in Massachusetts with my stepmom, who's a doctor. And I have to say that back in Costa Rica, I was there with my best friend over my birthday. And for my birthday day, she had gifted me a massage and a reading with a palm reader and astrologer.
Okay.
So while I was with this palm reader, astrologer, astrocartographer who like takes your natal chart and then somehow like can superimpose the planets over the atlas and through all these waves can tell you where in the world might suit you best in certain times of your life.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating.
My mind was blown. So during this reading, I'm telling her about how I'm not feeling great in my current life in New York and I don't know where I might go next. And so she's like, okay, well, let's look at the map here. So I gave her some ideas like, well, I was still in like the very cosmopolitan mindset. So, okay, well, maybe I could go to Los Angeles or LA or Paris or London or Melbourne. And she's like, that place could be great, but it's going to feel like the earth is shaking under your feet. That place is super wrong. That place is going to feel shiny, but is way too superficial for you. Ooh. It was really cool. And then she's like, do you have any connections to New England? Like Connecticut, Massachusetts, lower Vermont, lower New Hampshire? And I sort of put my head in my hands. I said, oh no, don't tell me that that's the best place for me, because my parents divorced when I was very young and I grew up in Washington, D.C., but my dad and my stepmom moved to like right outside of Boston when I was, 7, 8 years old. So I would come up and visit, but the area never struck me as being at all me. But apparently I've got this lady in front of me in Costa Rica who in a very mystical way is telling me, well, that for some reason I'm seeing that you have a lot of support there, a lot of healing to be done there, and a lot of yourself to feel at home there. And I was like, well, I guess it makes sense because aside from my mom, my entire family is there. So fast forward to the following like full weekend, I'm in this coffee shop alone. I get a call from my dad from Massachusetts. Oh, in his Hungarian accent, how are you? How was the trip? And I'm telling him about it. And he has this way of just kind of wandering around the house with the landline. And he'll come across me.
Gotta love a dad.
Yeah, he's a dad and he's a foreign dad. And he'll just hand the phone over, like without saying goodbye, he just hands it over to my stepmom. And I adore my stepmom, Karen. And she has this way of pulling out exactly like the emotion that lives within. I mean, she's a doctor and very good doctor. So like in her presence, I just like melt into my most vulnerable self. So very immediately on the phone in this coffee shop, I'm like starting to bawl, and I had just gotten done telling my dad how great Costa Rica was. But then I'm now telling her Costa Rica was great, but it also helped me realize that my actual life is completely wrong. And I've lived all of it like being in pursuit of being the perfect daughter and going after what I thought would make my family and my parents really happy and proud of me. And like, oh, continuing on the lineage of being an architect, like my dad is one, my grandfather's one, my grandmother's one. And now I'm here living in New York City, trying to do the thing, and I'm dying inside. And I was like, and I don't know the way out or the way forward. I don't know what to do. And Karen just in a very like matter of fact, very calm way said, Merce, if that isn't right, then stop doing it. And you have a home here always. Come up here. Like,
I love Karen.
Oh my God. Oh, well, you're now like 5 minutes from her, so we can hang out and have coffee.
Oh, I'm so excited.
To jump forward quite quickly, the following week at work, I resigned and I said, like, I'll work until I, finish out my projects. And I did that within a month. Then my dad drove down to Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn, and we packed up my studio apartment and I moved up to be back with my parents. And I had never lived with them full time. And I had never lived with my parents after graduating college. So it was a massive hit to my pride to say like, oh, I was an architect. Now I'm not anything or not anything professionally. And I now live in the middle of Massachusetts with my parents. Like, what is happening?
For people that are not from Massachusetts, and I am not from Massachusetts, but my mother is from Massachusetts, and that's why I've always wanted to live here. However, Boston is the center of the universe. Everything about a mile further away is less desirable in the mind of someone from Massachusetts. Yeah. It's really bizarre where I love that city, but I didn't want to live in the city.
Right.
So for me, having this property in the country, and they're like, oh, are you even west of 495? Like that's practically the Berkshires, like 200 miles from the Berkshires. I'm 1 mile from, Metro West, but it's just less desirable, which is awesome because the cost significantly goes down the further away you get. But it's just really fascinating. So I understand like moving from Manhattan to the middle of anywhere, the middle of Massachusetts, there's a mindset to that as well.
It certainly provided the quiet that I needed, in juxtaposition to what I was living in before, just all the mental clutter and the actual clatter of the city. But a major energetic shift. Yeah. So I can't tell you the hours, hundreds of hours of walks on deserted country-ish roads that I went on with this self-exploration audiobook and that podcast. And oh my gosh, Wendy, if I had had your podcast back then, it would have been very helpful.
Well, it wasn't ready because you weren't ready.
Mm-hmm. Boy, I think if I'm thinking of the greatest leaps that have made me, I would call them yeses to myself that amounted in the biggest learning moments, and I guess hence gifts, have been when I've done like some super courageous action. Because I'm just thinking of all the leaps that I had to make that I didn't think I was fully capable of, or I was super duper scared of, that led me to the job that I got in New York, or gosh, the courage that I had to harness to go from being like a non-athlete to trying out for the rowing team in middle school. Oh my gosh, I cried for days to my mom, like nervousness that I couldn't do it. And then the one I'm thinking of is I had never online dated, and then put together this OkCupid profile. This was 2 years into me living up here in Massachusetts. One day I was just like, I have so much love in my heart that I know is meant for more than just like loving myself really well. Like I fully like deeply desired to love another. And I was like, I guess my expectation of meeting my husband in the produce section of Whole Foods is not going to pan out. Like hasn't worked so
We're
far.
on a country road.
No, right? So put together this pretty banging OkCupid profile, in my humble opinion. I worked for days on it. And within a few days, Josh and I mean, that's a whole nother story, but he liked me and I liked him. And within 2 dates, we were starting to live together. So the courage, those courageous actions were major yeses, you know, like saying yes to myself and what I knew I wanted next.
That's so beautiful. Yes, I've heard that confidence comes on the other side of courage. Like if you're waiting until you're ready to do that thing, you won't. And ready is not a feeling, ready is a decision. And you've been able to recognize in your life times that were not sustainable, times that even though on paper everything looked great, you knew inside of you that there was something more. And I think that's so beautiful. And I love that you shared that story. You know, what's most personal is most universal. So there are people that need to hear all the beautiful things that you have to say, all the beautiful things that I have to say, because we are just one. We are a collective, and we gain strength and empowerment and courage and confidence from our identifying with each other. So I'm so grateful that you shared that. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I think it's important for me, like every single day, I try to remember my past self and those times when I wouldn't say super nervous, but excited in a very like energized, tactile, like movement oriented way to talk to you today.
Oh, yay.
I have not been on a podcast yet. And when you asked me, I was, oh yeah.
You have so much to say.
Oh, obviously, I've been chattering on and on. I think naturally I'm on the spectrum of fearful versus fearless. I'm a bit more on the fearless side, but I have a lot of fears every day that, because, you know, like old habits die hard, and the perfectionism and the over preparation, and that over preparation leading to procrastination. Those are major things in my life. So every day, like I'm now, the identity that I harness or relate to most is artist now.
Right.
And sometimes I'll look at things that I've done even like back in college in architecture school, or things that I did 2 years ago. And I'm like, man, that's pretty good. I don't know if I could do something that well again. And like with our conversation this morning, I've done things in the past that have turned out well and have been the product of me stretching at that time beyond what I thought I could have done. So I can have a conversation with Wendy. Like, obviously she's now one of my best friends. We're just recording it.
Right. That's so beautiful. And yes, we're queens. We can do amazing things. And sometimes we get these gorgeous opportunities to remind ourselves by retelling a story, by remembering a time in our life that felt like a lily pad. It was momentous. It was the biggest thing we had ever experienced. And now the further in our rearview mirror that it becomes, we see it for new gifts and new revelations and new ways to energize us into what is next. You know, you used the words when you were reflecting on running on the beach in Costa Rica, that the life that you were living in New York was not sustainable. And it's the same thing that you said to Josh this morning about what's happening with your sweet dog. And it's a fascinating word. And I think that it is one that speaks to the gravity of how something is impacting us. And there's really no measure, I don't think there's a measure for what the actual circumstance is that makes one person's pain, one person's loneliness, one person's dis-ease, it feels the same to them, regardless of what the actual circumstance is that's causing it. So if I am feeling devastated by something that's happening in my life, and someone else is feeling devastated by what's happening in their life, but theirs is they just got a terminal illness reported to them, and I just got my barn burned down. There are no different levels of circumstance that bring us pain or bring us joy, is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, completely.
Like the circumstances are different, but the emotion is the same. And I just want to hold space for the things that bring us joy and the things that bring us pain, and equalize them regardless. Because I think sometimes we'd say, oh, well, I don't want to complain about my dog because other people have it so much worse and some people can't have a dog, whatever, right? But it doesn't matter. We're holding space for the experiences of the person that's in front of us. And that has meaning and merit regardless of the circumstances that are causing the emotion.
Right. That was a beautiful way of taking how we started the conversation about what could be, and in the grand scheme of things, it is quite a minimal inconvenience to be kept awake with sneezes by the dog that you adore.
Right.
But it's a really fascinating microcosm, macrocosm kind of thing of everyone, and perhaps people listening to us, or in your way, Wendy, like there's something going on in your life, I'm sure, that is just that thing that is kind of not irking, but or just like a nuisance, or a thing that could be, there's a solution to it. There's a thing that could feel a bit better. And
yes.
why not vocalize to oneself and or the people around us who can help make it possible that this thing isn't quite exactly what we want, or it's not serving us super duper well, but how might we pivot it or spin it or progress beyond it to a place that's super delightful? Let's explore the possibilities that could happen.
I love that. And I love asking that question to everything.
Right? Yeah.
Like what's in my glass right now? Oh, this coffee is no longer the temperature that delights me.
Yes.
I'm going to remedy me that. I don't have to drink cold coffee. I don't, there's just so many things that I think we settle for or tolerate either knowingly or habitually without being mindful of it. And I think that this conversation has been really helpful for me to be more aware of the things that maybe I haven't figured out the best way, but I'm pretty sure I know a better way. I'm really excited to implement that. So thank you so much for this. This has been really delightful.
Oh,
thank you.
Of course, of course. Was there any other yesy things that you wanted to chat about today?
Are there any yesy things that you would like to chat about today? What are you up to now? How can people find what you're doing? You have that gorgeous piece behind you.
Oh.
You are an amazing artist. Tell me how you are saying yes to yourself now.
Well, I received that. Thank you very much. It's been, aside from finding meaningful love right in tandem with that, it's been the epic level up of my life over the past 4 to 5 years is leaning into the artist in me.
Yes.
And feeling so much congruence with that. So thank you. I really appreciate that. This piece that's behind me is on the easel right now. I completed it a year ago, but the place in the house where it was on the wall needs to be reconfigured. So
okay. There's a better way.
There's a much better way. And yeah, our house, man, it's all painted white. It's a full-on gallery to the ever-evolving work that's being produced. And I'm very thankful to have a partner who enjoys the aesthetic. I have a website if people want to look at more of the work. It's mercedeskiss.com. And I'm on Insta.
Best last name ever.
Oh,
Mercedes
yeah. I didn't have anything to do with it.
Keeping her maiden name of Kiss, because why not?
I was like, Josh gets to keep his last name. I like my last name, so I'm going to keep it. So mercedeskiss.com is the site, and I put up new pieces. I'm going to start selling prints soon of both my artwork and photography. Like you, Wendy, I love European travel, so the photography is from cities around Europe, countrysides of Europe, and like the major cities of the US, mostly New York and Washington, D.C. Oh, Insta is at Mercedes Lucia, Lucia, Kiss.
Perfect. And we'll put all the links in the show notes, and everyone can give you a follow and see what you're up to and the better way that you're paving. It's beautiful. Thank you so much for this, my friend.
Oh, thank you, Wendy. You're a treasure, and thank you for moving to Massachusetts so I could find you easier.
My great pleasure. And I received that right back. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. As always, any links or notes mentioned can be found at phineaswrighthouse.com in the podcast section of our site or in the show notes below. And if you haven't connected with me personally, come find me on Instagram at Phineas Wrighthouse and let me know you listened to this episode. I'd love to get to know you. Thank you for sharing this time with me. I know your days are full, and I'm really grateful that you chose to spend some of your precious time right here. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any of these delightful conversations. I'll see you next week.